Alex Bale is wrong about his evolution theory of Bikini Bottom. But before I can explain why, first, I need to explain the key parts of his theory. Number one, King Neptune used his powers to hand select certain fish to evolve to become sentient, leaving the rest of the population in their primitive state. Second, the evolved fish of the SpongeBob universe are cannibals. And third, Mr. Krabs killed Pearl's mother and is using her flesh as the key ingredient in the Krabby Patty. But Alex is wrong about all three of these conclusions. But before I get into why I disagree with him, first I want to talk about an important part of his theory that I actually do agree with. You see, there is a very popular theory out there that the residents of Bikini Bottom are the result of nuclear testing. This is mainly because Bikini Bottom is named after Bikini Atoll, which was made famous after World War II as the United States used the area to test nuclear weapons. But Alex doesn't believe that Bikini Bottom was created as a result of nuclear fallout. He points to the fact that highly evolved species existed in prehistoric times, well before the first weapon was ever tested in the area in 1946.
Prehistoric Bikini Bottom. We've seen episodes like UGG or SB-129 that show Bikini Bottom millions of years in the past, but we still see evolved versions of SpongeBob and Patrick. Sure, they may not be super intelligent or advanced, but they're still clearly way more evolved than the primitive, realistic versions we see in Feral Friends or in the fish store. So, how are we seeing these evolutions millions of years before the Bikini Atoll tests? Well, unfortunately, I think the only conclusion is that the Bikini Atoll theory just isn't true.
But there are a couple of other things that Alex either missed or simply didn't feel the need to include in his video that I think should be brought up. First is Mr. Krabs' age. Mr. Krabs is the oldest of the main cast members, which makes sense considering that crabs can live to be pretty old. In fact, there are some species that can live just as long, if not longer, than humans. And while it's not clear exactly what species Eugene is, we do know how old he is thanks to the driver's license we see in the episode Sleepy Time. Here we can clearly see that he was born on November 30th, 1942, 4 years before nuclear testing began at Bikini Atoll. The second important thing to note here is that Bikini Bottom is on the ocean floor. And in case you guys didn't know, the ocean is pretty deep. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Pacific Ocean has an average depth of around 14,000 feet to be specific. And water happens to be pretty good at stopping things. If you've ever seen a video of someone shooting a gun into a large body of water, you know that bullets don't travel very far underwater. But water is also good at stopping radiation. The main damaging form of radiation that is emitted from nuclear weapons, like the ones tested at Bikini Atoll, is gamma rays. But it only takes about 14 feet of water to completely stop this form of radiation. So even if Bikini Bottom is directly underneath the site of weapons testing, as long as the city is more than 14 feet underwater, there wouldn't really be any effect at all. And I think it's pretty safe to say that Bikini Bottom is more than 14 feet underwater. So basically, on this front at least, Alex and I agree. Bikini Bottom and all of its inhabitants are not the result of nuclear weapons testing. But when it comes to this part of his theory, that is where our agreement ends. Alex argues that the reason Bikini Bottomites became so highly evolved is because King Neptune used his powers to evolve the fish so that he could rule over them. And he points to the episode Feral Friends for his evidence to back up this idea. In Feral Friends, it is revealed that there is a special moon called Neptune's moon that appears once every 100 years, and it makes all the fish devolve back into their primal, more realistic forms. Alex argues that King Neptune is the one behind this, not only because the moon is named after him, but also because he is shown to, and I quote, change the form of Mr. Krabs in the Spongebob movie.
In the entire show, the only thing we've seen that directly affects the evolution of characters is the green moon in Feral Friends. Except the French narrator specifically calls it Neptune's moon.
It is called Neptune's moon.
Named after the ruler of the seven seas, King Neptune. King Neptune is a character who's been around since the beginning of the sea. He's a character who the Bikini Bottom citizens view as their god, and he's a character who has the ability to change fish into other forms.
What the? Oops.
King Neptune used his magic to turn the fish of the sea into more evolved subjects for him to rule over. He's the one who's been behind it all this time.
But I have a number of doubts about this theory. First of all, just because the moon is named after Neptune does not necessarily mean that it is some object enhanced by his powers. After all, Mars is named after the Roman god of war, but I'm pretty sure the planet doesn't actually have any impact on the wars fought on Earth. As far as we know, this moon could have gotten its name from ancient ocean dwellers who wanted to honor their king, or perhaps they feared the moon's powers and named it after Neptune in an effort to please him, so he would protect them from it. Second, why would King Neptune need to create highly evolved fish just to rule over them? It's not like he's using them as slaves or anything. Or is he? He's not. So what is his incentive? Wouldn't it be easier to rule over the lesser evolved species anyways? Furthermore, why would he use his special moon to devolve all the fish? Wouldn't it be more fun for him to run around zapping them with his triton? If anything, the sentient fish of Bikini Bottom present a threat to Neptune's power. As we saw in the Spongebob movie, Plankton was successful not only in negating Neptune just by stealing his crown, but he also successfully took over his mind, harnessing his powers for evil. To me, this proves that Neptune isn't even a real god, as a real god never would have been defeated by a mere mortal that easily. Especially a mere mortal like Plankton, who proves to be quite incompetent over and over again. And this could also explain why Neptune has so many different forms. What if, instead of him being a god, he's just a normal king, and Bikini Bottomites just think he's a god? Who's to say Bikini Bottomites are right about Neptune? After all, there are thousands of religions in the real world, so if any of them are true, it can only be one, right? Who's to say this isn't also the case in Bikini Bottom? We do know that some of the fish in the show believe Poseidon is the real ruler of the sea. So what if Neptune is just a godlike figure that uses his status as a god to maintain his control over his kingdom? And that brings me to the final problem with this part of Alex's theory, and this is the most damning. Alex argues that Neptune must have been the one to evolve the fish at Bikini Bottom because he altered the form of Mr. Krabs at the end of the SpongeBob movie. But Neptune didn't make Eugene any more evolved than he already was, he just turned him into a human instead of a crab. And then we get this highly important close-up of Neptune's Triton, which clearly has two settings on it, unfrozen and real boy ending. There is no setting for evolution. Checkmate, Alex! Also, it should be noted that Neptune doesn't do anything special in the movie that would indicate that he's actually a god. All the powers he uses revolve around his Triton. He uses it to set Mr. Krabs on fire, freeze him, turn him into a human, and eventually turn him back into a crab. There is no evidence that Neptune innately has these powers. For all we know, anyone who wields the Triton could potentially do the same things with it. So what if Neptune is just some random guy who happened to find a magic item and that's how he came to rule over the ocean? He's not a god, he's just a phony. And that brings us to the next part of Alex's theory, the war. As we know, the SpongeBob universe is a lot bigger than just Bikini Bottom. There's New Kelp City, Dolesville, Far Awayville, and Atlantis, just to name a few other locations. Alex argues that these cities are the result of Bikini Bottomites colonizing the ocean around them after a great war between evolved and primal fish.
But with this new context, is it possible that crabs fought in a war against these primitive, wild fish of the sea? I mean, let's remember in Feral Friends, some of those de-evolved fish were massive compared to the evolved fish, and they immediately started attacking each other.
The battle for the survival of the fittest rages on in the animal kingdom.
So yeah, in order for the Bikini Bottom citizens to survive and expand, they would probably break into some kind of war.
The only real evidence he has to support this claim is the fact that Mr. Krabs was in the Navy, and in the episode Krusty Krab training video, the narrator references the fact that he fought in a war which sent him into a Great Depression. He also points to the fact that there are pictures of a whale fighting a ship on his wall and a harpoon. I will concede that it is possible Mr. Krabs fought in some kind of war against primal fish, but really, this mysterious war could have been over anything. As far as I can tell, it's never referenced again throughout the rest of the show. We also know that Eugene spent part of his youth as a pirate, so I would argue that it is actually more likely that he fought in a war either as a pirate or against pirates when he was in the Navy. Maybe this war is what caused him to join the pirates, abandoning the Navy. Or perhaps it was the other way around. Maybe he was even a prisoner of war and was forced to switch sides. As for the pictures of the whale on his wall, wouldn't it make a lot more sense if instead of fighting whales in a war against primal fish, he was actually just illegally hunting whales while he was a pirate? After all, whaling has been illegal throughout most of the world since the 1980s due to commercial overfishing. There are still a few countries that allow it today, but none of them are anywhere near Bikini Bottom, assuming Bikini Bottom is actually near Bikini Atoll. So what if Mr. Krabs was actually just hunting whales for profit before he opened the Krusty Krab? After all, we know that he has no regard for the law whatsoever, and he will do anything for $1. And in his younger days, he clearly wasn't afraid to put his life on the line as both a pirate and a sailor. Either way, though, this brings us to the next part of the theory, which revolves around Mr. Krabs' daughter, Pearl. Pearl is actually a pretty interesting character. If you've ever thought about it, she is one of the only characters on the show whose species is not part of her name. We have Eugene Krabs, Sheldon Plankton, Spongebob, Patrick Star, Squidward. Squidward is actually an octopus, but I digress. Pearl is just Pearl. I mean, technically, her full name is Pearl Krabs, but when have you ever heard her being referred to by her full name besides just now? I've always thought that this is because they were trying to obscure the fact that she was a different species than her father. I mean, they clearly aren't really trying to hide it, but it is kind of interesting that whale is not part of her name. At least, it's interesting to me. Your results may vary. Anyways, how Mr. Krabs became Pearl's father has always been a cause for speculation among SpongeBob fans. Because how can a crab be the father of a whale? Some have speculated that she is adopted, but Alex has a much darker theory. He believes that Mr. Krabs killed her mother in the war against the primal fish, and then decided to take in Pearl after he realized that the whale he killed had an infant daughter.
Not only does this prove that there was a war between evolved and primitive fish, but Mr. Krabs definitely fought in it. But this also implies something very dark. Mr. Krabs killed Pearl's mother.
As I've already stated, I don't think Mr. Krabs fought in a war against primal fish, but it is very possible that he did kill her mother during his days as a pirate. Supposedly, production members have said that Mr. Krabs was once married to a whale, and Pearl is his legitimate daughter. However, the only reference to this I could find was on Wikipedia, and they failed to cite a source, so I have no idea if this is actually true or not. Regardless, the same Wikipedia article also states that Steven Hillenburg was, quote, very much against solving the mystery of how she joined the Krabs family. And this time, they do cite a source, which is a link to a tweet from Vincent Walker, one of the main storyboard artists for the show. And that tweet is no longer available, so I can't really fact check that either. But let's just assume that Hillenburg was opposed to revealing Pearl's real backstory. Why would that be the case? It certainly could be because her origin story is dark. Could it be because Mr. Krabs actually killed her mother? I think it's reasonable to make that assumption. That could be a point in favor of either my theory or Alex's. So I guess we'll just have to call this one a draw.
Well, Doodle, it looks like this is a draw.
But there's still more to this. Alex goes on to talk about how Mr. Krabs frequently uses the phrase mother of pearl. He argues that he uses this phrase specifically because he is traumatized about what happened to Pearl's mother, which is why he only uses it when he is shocked. However, I thought this was always meant to be a double entendre, referring both to Pearl's mother and the substance. You see, mother of pearl is formed by many species of mollusk as it lines the inside of their shells, and it is fairly valuable. It is often used in jewelry and other specialty decorative items such as inlays on a guitar neck. Since Mr. Krabs is so obsessed with money, I always thought that he used the phrase for that reason, or at least in part because of it. Obviously, the SpongeBob universe uses real money just like the real world, but I could see how Mother of Pearl could be a nautical themed replacement for cash, but maybe that's just me. Regardless, that brings us to the final and darkest part of Alex's theory, as he believes Pearl's mother is behind the biggest secret in SpongeBob SquarePants history, the Krabby Patty secret formula. In his video, Alex contends that the evolved fish of Bikini Bottom are cannibals, and he makes a pretty good argument here. The most obvious indicator of this is the existence of the chum bucket, which unsurprisingly serves chum, which is basically just ground up mystery fish meat. But there are plenty of other references to cannibalism on the show, which Alex covers, so I don't need to go over all of them here. I mean, if you're watching this video, odds are you've already seen his, but Alex takes this theory one extra step, and this is where I disagree with him. You see, Alex believes that the secret ingredient to the Krabby Patty is whale meat, and Mr. Krabs has been using Pearl's mother's flesh in his Krabby Patties.
It's strange, we never really see Mr. Krabs get the meat delivered, or at least go out himself to get it. It's almost like he has all the meat he needs stockpiled somewhere. What primitive meat could Mr. Krabs have access to? Maybe he's been holding on to something from the war. What could Mr. Krabs have killed during the war that he doesn't want anyone to find out about? Something big enough to supply him with meat for years without needing more. What could that be? You really gonna make me say it? Mr. Krabs is using Pearl's dead mother's carcass to make Krabby Patties.
I have a few things to say about this. First, I want to address the cannibalism claims more broadly. I don't necessarily think it is cannibalism if the evolved species of Bikini Bottom eat other species of fish. We know that there are varying levels of intelligence across the undersea animal kingdom in the SpongeBob universe. For example, certain species like anchovies seem to be of lesser intelligence. We see this in the pilot episode when they raid the Krusty Krab and are seemingly incapable of normal communication. It's almost like they're meant to be like herd animals of some kind. Then there's species like jellyfish, which are clearly just meant to be wild animals. It's almost like jellyfish are meant to be an allegory for real-world fish, i.e. jellyfish are to Bikini Bottomites what regular fish like trout and salmon are to us. That's why SpongeBob and Patrick like to go jellyfishing so often. So who's to say that some of these less intelligent species aren't just meant to be allegories for animals like chickens, cows, or pigs, all species that humans eat regularly? Maybe Bikini Bottomites don't see them as people at all. What if they just view them the same way we view cows? Because Bikini Bottom is underwater, obviously every species in the world is going to be some kind of fish. But in my opinion at least, it would only really be cannibalism if they were eating fish of the same species. So if Mr. Krabs was serving patties made out of crab meat, then yeah, that would be cannibalism. But as far as we are aware, that is not the case. Okay, so what about Alex's idea that Mr. Krabs is secretly serving whale meat at the Krusty Krab, and not just any whale, but Pearl's mother? Well, if that was the case, Mr. Krabs would have run out of meat a long time ago. I did some math on this, and just to be extra generous to Alex's theory, I was very generous with my estimation as to how many patties he could get out of a single whale. I did this by first assuming that Pearl's mother was a blue whale, the largest species known on Earth. I then assumed that she was on the heaviest end of the spectrum for blue whales, making her 330,000 pounds, which is still less than your mom, by the way. I then assumed that 100% of that weight would be used in the patties. Obviously, this wouldn't be the case in real life, as he would have to remove things like organs and bones, and I would imagine the weight of those things would add up with such a large animal. But even making all of these concessions, Mr. Krabs would only be able to get 1,320,000 quarter-pound patties out of Pearl's mother. That might sound like a lot of patties, but just for a frame of reference, McDonald's sells about 6.5 million burgers every day. Granted, that is across thousands of locations around the world, but still, given how popular the Krusty Krab is, 1.3 million patties probably wouldn't get him very far. In fact, if we take that number of 6.5 million burgers from McDonald's and divide it by 40,000, as there are roughly 40,000 McDonald's locations, that would be roughly 160 burgers per restaurant per day. So, assuming the Krusty Krab has about the same amount of business as your average McDonald's, that would mean Pearl's mother would give him enough meat to last 8,250 days, which is about 22 and a half years. Okay, did I just prove my own theory wrong? Not yet. Let's take a deeper dive into how much business the Krusty Krab gets. In an effort to find something that would back up my theory, I simply asked Google how many Krabby Patties SpongeBob has made, and it gave me the answer of 7,488,000. Google's AI overview even gives us a breakdown of how that calculation worked out, with SpongeBob cooking up 960 patties a day for 7,800 days. But wait, where did Google's AI overview actually get this information from? Ah, yes, a 1-year-old Reddit thread. This specific information came from a comment that was nowhere near the top of the thread and had a single upvote. Well, that's good enough for me. So if we assume that this random Redditor is correct in their calculations, this would mean that Mr. Krabs would run out of whale meat in a little under 4 years. And again, that is with me being as generous as possible in terms of how much usable meat he'd be able to get out of Pearl's mother's body. Realistically, he would probably run out a decent bit before that, meaning he would have to find and kill a whale of the same size every 3 years or so, which might not be that often, but it is certainly often enough that it would be difficult to get away with. Also, keep in mind that the Krusty Krab was in business before SpongeBob was even born, so even if Mr. Krabs was initially selling patties made out of Pearl's dead mother, he probably would have run out of whale meat well before SpongeBob even started working there. This brings up a whole load of questions. When would Mr. Krabs have the time to hunt more whales, especially since he's basically always at the Krusty Krab? How would he be able to do that by himself? He could hire a crew to help him, but they would have to keep it a secret, right? How would he hide the bodies? How would he process them? Did he try setting his freezer to Wumbo? How would he hide all of this from his whale daughter? Where would he store hundreds of thousands of pounds of raw meat? What happened to Old Man Jenkins? Wouldn't some of the meat start to go bad even in a freezer if it sits there long enough? Hopefully all these questions are enough to prove to you that Mr. Krabs is in fact not selling the remains of Pearl's mother to his customers. But even if it wasn't, you're still here watching this video, and that means I did a decent job of entertaining you, so I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for that. In all seriousness though, I really hope you liked this video. If you did, I'll leave another one on screen for you now to enjoy. That's all for this one. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one, and as always, never forget to be yourself.